Hey everyone, this is Spencer and Zach, and we're starting a new series here. We're talking about becoming an influential leader in your 20s. So this is the first segment of many to come, and in this segment, we're going to give our 3 top tips, if you will, for recent college graduates, though I think the wisdom holds true really for anyone in their 20s or even in their teens as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Zach to give his number 1 tip, and then we're going to kind of go back and forth here and discuss them a little bit.
I think that there's this thing you spent 4 years, 5 years for some of you, 6 years for some of you, developing this education and anticipating this awesome and wonderful entry into the workforce where you get your dream job, you move up the ladder immediately. I think one of the best tips that I can give you is that no job is below you. You're able to go into these jobs and you need to gain experience first. You know, a lot of what I did, you know, I was in a job that I was passionate about, but I was never above carpet cleaning. I cleaned pools for a really long time. I fixed fences. There's a lot of things that I had to do as a young person because I didn't have experience, that I had to do these jobs that maybe weren't in my wheelhouse, they weren't in my major, maybe not my dream jobs, but man, I'm a young person, I'm developing a resume, I'm developing these things about myself. I can't feel like 4 years of sitting at a desk has all of a sudden made me qualified to be a manager somewhere, right? I think that's a pretty arrogant thing. And so no job is below you, I would think, is my first tip.
Yeah, I love that tip. And just as someone who hires people, you know, from a resume standpoint, I love seeing people who are not above, you know, getting their hands dirty, cleaning carpets, you know, waiting tables. Those types of service jobs, I think, show a potential employer that you're willing to go the extra mile to put food on the table and to achieve your goals. And I think it actually relates pretty well to my first tip, which is to take risks. And I think, look, when we're young, we don't have very far to fall. You know, we don't have a mortgage, we don't have 5 kids to feed or whatever it is, right? We can afford to take risks because if they don't pay off, well, we're not losing the house. You know, our kids aren't going hungry. You know, the foster care system's not knocking on our doors at night, right? We have that leeway and that margin to start taking risks. And what I see so often, unfortunately, is that young people, they like to take those stable jobs, right? They feel like, you know, kind of what Zach was saying, I have this degree, I'm entitled to this good job at a cool company, and they get really comfortable there, right? Instead of saying, hey, this is my 20s, I have little to lose, I'm going to take risks with things I do care about. On the side, you know, sort of a side hustle, I'm going to start that nonprofit, I'm going to volunteer for that organization, I'm going to start that business. And it's really in those instances that we're willing to take those risks, you know, take those positions of leadership, you know, creating value from something like a nonprofit and a business. That's where we really learn and where we grow. And I think so often we get this idea of, there's sort of this track set out for us. You know, I got this degree, I get this job, we get promoted, and we kind of go from there. And I'd advocate a different type of approach. Do what you're passionate about, do something that's going to lead you to your goals, and then work those jobs to create enough cash flow and put money on the table. You know, when I helped start H4O, obviously it's very risky. When we started H4O originally, I couldn't make any money from what we were doing. And so I remember, you know, I would go around and tutor kids at night in math, and I had to, you know, buy a pre-calc book and go through it and learn it again because, you know, I'd forgotten a lot of it. But it's little things like that you have to be willing to do to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, and I would say that a part of the risk is saying, hey, I'm going to be self-sufficient. Yeah. I'm not just going to, you know, stay at mom and dad's house, or I'm not going to be, you know, continuing to live off, you know, my student loans. I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to be self-sufficient, right? And I think that's a huge risk for young people, is to say, do you know what? This is my dream, and the first step might be just launching myself out and waiting tables, doing all of that stuff, and then on the side at night, really getting your passions, you know, forward on your off hours.
Yeah, totally.
And then I feel like eventually, you know, the balance starts to, you know, it starts to balance itself out, right? And so, yeah, I would say that's really good advice is to, if you're passionate about something, a part of the risk is saying, you know what, I'm going to do this on my own.
Right.
Right? I'm going to go out, I'm going to be a part of that. And, you're right, you don't have a lot to lose as young people. we don't. You know, what the decisions you make as a young person, Spencer's totally right. The decisions you make as a young person aren't going to affect a wife or a husband and your kids and your mortgage and all of this stuff. It just affects you, and it's going to be okay. So yeah, take risks. That's really good advice.
Yeah, and I think just before we get to Zach's second tip here, we're playing alongside that, this idea of becoming self-sufficient, I think, is really key. Because when we do put ourselves in risky situations where we don't know if it's going to work out, if it's going to happen, it really kicks in sort of this survival instinct in all of us that basically says, I'm willing to go the extra mile, and I'm willing to work harder, learn more, do whatever it takes to be successful. And it's in those moments, again, where we have tremendous growth. And so, having a huge safety net, I actually think is a huge detriment to young people. And so if you have that safety net, I'd really encourage you to cut ties with that to a degree, to kind of become more self-sufficient, so that when you do take those risks, you really have to make it happen. You're either going to make it happen or, it's going to be tough on you. And so I think in those situations, you really step up to the plate. So, all right, Zach.
Yeah,
tip number two.
I would say my second tip for all of you that are graduating college, trying to get into the workforce, trying to do your thing, is to don't be selfish. And that's a very broad thing for me to say. Don't be selfish, and I can just leave it at that and allow you to do with it what you will. But I'll be specific: is don't be selfish when it comes to working with others. I think a lot of people go into their jobs and they think, all right, what can my job offer me? Especially when you go into job interviews, when you go into different new parts of your life, we go in with this mentality of, okay, what can this business, this organization, this nonprofit, this volunteer experience, what can it do for me in building my resume? What can it do for me in building my skills? What can it do for me as far as income goes? What can it do for me as regards to my social status? I think we have that inward curve heart that's always thinking about, all right, how does this affect me?
Yeah.
You need to start rewiring the way you think a little bit, and this will help you with employers, especially when you're interviewing, is you need to go into it thinking, okay, what can I offer the company? What can I offer the organization? What can I offer people, right, that I'm working with? And thinking in those terms, not being selfish, not thinking only about how it affects you, but about your skills and what you have to offer that makes other people better off is a better selling point for people hiring you, and people are going to want to work with you more. If you're not just seeing them as these means to an ends to get you where you want to go, but you see these people, oh, I work with this person, how can I help them get ahead, right? It's counterintuitive, but it's the way the world's going right now, and we need to learn to work with a team.
Absolutely. I think what Zach said, teamwork is crucial. Employers are looking for people who want to make the company and the team successful above themselves, right? I mean, it's so obvious when you think about it like this, right? I mean, would you rather hire someone who's really in it for themselves, or would you rather hire someone who is willing to sacrifice their own personal gain for the good of the company, right? And it's clearly the latter. And so I know it's hard, it's not easy. I know some of you are probably very selfless. This doesn't apply to you, but I think what Zach said is true. It's very key to have that mindset of how can I help you. And so for my second tip, it's to always be learning. And I think there's two different things I'd like to say about this. The first thing is if you're not learning, you're falling behind. And that's just how the way the world works now, due to competition globally, but also just within different industries. And so much new knowledge coming into play even almost daily. It's so important to continue to learn and sort of hone your trade, hone your craft. And a good example of this is, let's just take web developing, for example. If you were a web developer 5 years ago, you were using entirely different mechanisms, languages, etc., to build web platforms. And now it's entirely different. And so if you didn't really keep up with that, if you weren't constantly learning to stay with the trend, you'd be essentially out of a job nowadays. And it's important to remember that we can't rest on our laurels. We always have to be learning. And the second thing I want to say is when you do hit those hurdles or roadblocks, a lot of times you just have to learn the knowledge that you need to overcome them. So if you're looking to start a company and you know nothing about marketing or building that website or social media or all those different things, well, you have to learn. You don't have the budget to hire somebody else. And what I see a lot of people do is they say, well, I just don't know how to do this. I can't do it. Well, if you want to build that app and you can't find someone to do it for you, why not just learn? And go as far as you can so you actually have something tangible. You have to be willing to learn in order to overcome those obstacles in your way.
Yeah, I think Spencer actually hit on one of my greatest pet peeves is when, I'm discussing with someone on a goal that we need to meet, and then they say, well, I don't do that. I don't know how. I'm not going to. I can't, right? And I think there's definitely areas where that applies, right? If you ask me to, be an engineer, I'm not an engineer. I can do my best and try and learn, but there's a lot of aspects in life where you're going to be pushed a little bit, where your education only goes so far. Your job, most likely, I could actually say 100%, with 100% certainty, your job's going to ask you to do things you never went through in college. Never. You have to be willing to keep learning. A part of college and why you spent all this time having this education is not just for the actual material that you learned, but it's learning how to learn, right? Learning how to study things, learning how to put your work ethic in, have your mind learn how to be creative and learning new things, right? So I think it's really important because life is just going to throw you for a loop and you got to adapt. You have to learn. We're newlyweds, right? I mean, not newlyweds, but we both got married recently to two wonderful different women. And I think what's awesome and terrifying is that I have to learn how to be a husband. I have to learn how to be married. That's not something you just naturally learn, right? So to be successful about anything in life, eventually I'm going to be a parent. I have to learn how to be a parent, right? And so we have to be willing in every aspect of life, to learn and adapt. Right? So, and in my third point that actually flows into that pretty well is that we have to be willing to learn from the generation above us.
Yeah.
Right? I think a lot of the times as young people, and actually just being transparent with all of you for a second, that the greatest failures in my life have actually been a result of me demonizing and making the enemy of people that are older than me. Because I started out really young as a leader, and so I always saw older people as, almost like hurdles to get past, right? I always thought that they were out to get me. I always thought that the criticism that they had or the tips that they had for me were them being pandering or them being super passive-aggressive towards me. And one thing that you as a young person, especially coming out of college or you're in college trying to insert yourself into these areas, is that you have to learn how to work with people that are a different generation than you. That's going to be a reality that you have to learn, you have to get used to. It's not changing. You have to learn how to work with people that are not your age, and you have to learn to appreciate their experiences, their skills, and the knowledge they have to offer you. Yeah, of course, they have to learn to not be so stuck in their ways and learn from you as well, but listen, they have stuff to share with you. They have knowledge that you desperately need. Don't spend the first part of your younger years not accepting the really, really good advice of people that are older than you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just a great example for us all to wrap our heads around this idea is go back and look at papers you wrote 2 years ago versus the ones you wrote this year. And, I don't know about you, but for me, looking back at papers I wrote, say, freshman year of college versus senior year of college, it's just night and day. The quality, the logical deduction, etc. It's just on a whole new level. And I think what that shows is that we learn and gain wisdom through experience, right? And so older people have had that experience and have acquired that knowledge over years. And the reality is there's so much to learn from them in that regard. And so I guess don't discount what they know or what you might think they don't know, because they've been through a lot of things, a lot more things than you have. And I just look at myself as a leader, and just take leading H4O as an example. But there's things I did a year ago that I know that I should not do and would never do again, right? Mistakes I made a year ago. And it's humbling, because when you think about that, it means 2 years from now I'm going to look back on myself now and say, gosh, I was such an idiot for doing that, right? But the point is that we learn through experience, and adults that are much older than us have a lot more experience and a lot to offer in terms of that. And I think it's, like Zach said, there's a little bit of a generational disconnect, but I still think that there is a lot to learn. That's a great point.
Absolutely. Your third point?
My third point is to be patient. And look, this thought is coming from someone who is incredibly, incredibly impatient. And people who know me well know that I struggle with patience probably above all else, because I like to get things moving really quickly. I like to see results. I don't like waiting around, and as Zach would probably tell you, I don't like waiting around on him or anyone, right? It's like, let's just go. Let's make this happen, sort of guns blazing. But one of the things I've learned just by doing H4O and a number of other things is you have to be patient because things take time, right? And just because you feel like you have this great idea, it doesn't mean that everyone else is going to think it's such a great idea right away. It takes time to convince people and to change people's behavior, right? You think about somebody who's pitching you an idea, usually you don't just go, usually you don't share that same enthusiasm and passion right away, right? And so when you're living and breathing a company or an idea or a cause, we get ourselves so fired up about it, but we have to remember that we've been living and breathing that cause or that idea for a long period of time, and others haven't been. Yeah. And so it's really important to stay patient and to stay the course. And so what I found a lot of times, I'd get so frustrated with things weren't working out exactly or how I wanted them to be or as quickly as I wanted them to be. And so a lot of times I'd almost like abandon the idea and just say, well, it's not working. People don't care about it. And it's like, no, they do. You just have to be patient about it. And that's something that I've had to learn the hard way, I think. And if it's one thing I'd like to share with you, and especially those of you who really want to start out of the gate as fast as you can, I think that's awesome. But just have that realism that it takes time to get where you want to go. And there's really no shortcuts. It's going to take a year, years of hard work, putting in the time. There's no such thing as you just get out of school and within a year you're a multimillionaire. That just doesn't exist, right? It takes time. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think patience is something that through a lot of failure that had to be ingrained in my head very, very early on when I tried to be, even in high school, when I was trying different leadership positions and really trying to see things through. And one thing that's really helped me learn patience and that I'll give to you just as some advice is that you want to look at things more like a farmer looks at a field a lot of the time, where seeds are planted, and that might be your idea, right? It's just a seed, and you don't expect, a farmer doesn't expect to, throw out some seeds and for everything to just grow immediately and it's a crop immediately and everyone enjoys the food, right? That just isn't a reality, and so we have to have the patience of a farmer, where our idea is a seed or our passions or this new job, it's a seed, and it takes watering, it takes taking care of, it takes putting the right soil, creating a good environment for it. It takes sunlight, weeks and weeks of sunlight and rain. There's a lot that goes into seeing something produce a crop, produce fruit, and that goes with us personally in our lives, but also in our professional endeavors and the passions that we have in life. And so we need to realize that there isn't going to be this instant gratification in a lot of the things that we do. And so start looking at the things you start in your lives as a farmer looks at a field a little bit more. And that way it becomes almost like a project, right? It becomes everything that you do, you don't expect results right away because it takes time, it takes finesse, it takes skill to cultivate something. Don't give it up right away. Just because it hasn't budded in a few weeks doesn't mean it's not there under the soil, just about to sprout above the ground. You may give up way too soon when all it took was an extra day, an extra week, an extra month. And so just look at things like a farmer looks at a field would be my advice to those who struggle with patience.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously a lot of thoughts here. And there's so many things to talk about as it relates to us as a generation of young people becoming influential leaders, making our mark, making change happen in the world. We're going to talk about a lot of different topics throughout this series in the weeks to come, but wanted to get a few just different thoughts out there. Feel free to comment below with different ideas you have as what it takes to be an influential leader. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And perhaps if you have any questions or you want us to talk about anything in particular, please feel free to find us, online at our website, handsforothers.org, on Twitter, Instagram, Hands for Others is the name. But thanks for tuning in. I hope this was helpful to you, and we hope to see you in future weeks.